Today I'm going to go over my capstone paper, and my topic was evaluating the criteria used for literature selections in public high schools. So I had three main objectives with this sort of research paper. I wanted to come up with a tight list of what those criteria should actually be and how we could make that to be balanced, because I found that we have two separate mouths to feed. You have like the actual pedagogical standards-based content learning skills, and then you have the big social conversation about the humanities of what is being taught with the literature that's in the classrooms. And then under each criteria, I address the logical fallacies and discourse surrounding that element. You know, what do we mean when we say canon? And then I tried to use my own chart and analysis for the actual work that I was using and literature I was using in my classroom to see how it stacked up. I developed I defined 9 basic criteria that we should look at for every book. The state standards, pedagogical development, literary aspects, barrier considerations, and instructional levels are in that first stream. We sort of go from narrow to wide. These are all like requirements of every book, and it's more about which ones you're using than how or in which ways. And then timelessness or contemporary literature, canonical or exploratory, interpersonal connections, and knowledge of content or context are sort of those bigger conversations. The state standards we would use them for Ohio. They're used for every book, but when I examine reading literature, writing literature, language, or whatever that standard is specifically with those 9 streams, which one am I using and am I noticing any deficits? So it kind of helps create a more thorough understanding of what's being used. Pedagogical development was an important but overlooked one. So when we're having these conversations about what should we read, there are times in which we may want to put forth one type of work for one type of reason, but does it fulfill the student's ability to learn their skills well? The Crucible is going to be a hard book to remove because not only is it something that is beloved, but it teaches the skill of literary analysis really well. Because when you break down the McCarthyism, the witch trials, and the author's personal relationship, you get several different versions of the story you've read. And that's really effective in the classroom when showing that to students. And then we have literary aspects. This was a fun category to examine. The people use this all the time in their debates. It's high art, it's lofty. What do we mean by that? So I sort of examine that and I list specifics. Barrier considerations is often in a forgotten element, and I think it's essential. You can pick and want all the books in the world. Can your school afford it? Do you have access to it? Will people support it, especially in 2022 when books are being banned and some books are being restricted for political or social reasons? So what's your actual access to these books? Instructional level. So why is this book being taught at this grade level? Like, what is the specific reason in which you're doing that, and how does it facilitate that well? And this also becomes an argument against the idea of using books for college readiness. I think that that's a fallacy, and I examine that. And then when we get to the last half, it's either or. A book is either known for its ability to last the test of time, or it's contemporary. It's one or the other. Which one is it doing? How is it doing so effectively? Can it be tied with another one that does the other thing? And when is the right choice for which one? And what are the limitations and benefits of each one? Interpersonal connection is how I decided to address the desire to put diversity in literature. There can be danger to putting in diversity incorrectly. Teachers need to be properly educated. And there is a misconception that we're adding diversity. It creates this concept that to be white, straight, and male is neutral, and the other groups are othered. Instead, works are either there for representation or empathy. They're always doing one of two things. You're in one of those two camps. Who are you representing, and who is developing empathy through this literary reading? Are you just representing the same person over and over is what you need to notice in your patterns, and kind of developing this argument of semantics about specifically what we mean by these words and how they function with the literature we choose. And then lastly, knowledge of content. It is wonderful to have found a work that is actually going to be beneficial for your students because it is lofty and it represents a group that needs to be represented in your community, and it does all these things. Are you capable of teaching it? When we acknowledge that the lack of diversity in our current curriculum is actually a symptom of of a larger problem and not something that can be so easily corrected, then you also have to admit that you might have been miseducated or undereducated. So classroom teachers have to do extra work to be able to pilot these things. Are you prepared? Because choosing to teach a book without that proper nuance and education can be more harmful. And so then I applied this against my own work, and I just used The Great Gatsby. If I were to make this project longer, I would have done my whole curriculum, and I would have, then highlighted my gaps and stuff. But the paper was already getting, I think it got up to 51 pages. So I felt like it had done its job. But it was interesting the things that I found that this book did do and that it could not do, and how I could immediately see that, especially when I got down to interpersonal connections. Well, then I could pair, The Great Gatsby with A Raisin in the Sun and Fences. They're thematically similar. They're language similar, although one is a play. But now you have this shift in interpersonal connections, and it's deepened by using both. So overall, in my conclusions, I found that there is a lot to examine, and there is a benefit to examining it all at once. And that the choices that we make as to what is read in the high school classroom is a lot more complicated than we like to pretend it to be. And it definitely deserves more study and more focus. And I would love to learn and develop some analytics about it. So thanks for listening to this sort of a review of my capstone. I hope you enjoy reading it if you get the chance.